Hi everybody, with our Legend Life Stories, we speak to travelers, adventurers and athletes who share their inspirational stories and prove to us that we're never too old and never too late to live our best life. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Alice Morrison. So Alice is an adventurer, traveler, explorer, media person, TV presenter, journalist, and she's currently based in Morocco. Alice has undertaken a number of different adventures. She's cycled from Cairo to Cape Town. She's competed in the Marathon Des Sables. She has also undertaken a number of world firsts from her base in Morocco, including her most recent adventure, which was trekking the length of the Draa River. So how are you going today, Alice?
I'm great. If anyone's watching as well as listening, I just want to show them where I live. So I live in the high Atlas Mountains of Morocco. And this is the view from my terrace. So I'm awesome. Surrounded by 3,000 plus meter peaks. And it's lovely. And it's because of the weather at the moment is perfect. Behind me, you can see these are all walnut trees. And our houses are all built into the mountains. So it's almost like being in a sea of trees. I'm in a tree house, effectively. So yeah, all is good here in Morocco.
Awesome. So now let's get started, because you've got quite an interesting journey, because you actually started off in the corporate world and then you made a life change around about 2011. But let's go back a little bit further, because also your childhood was quite interesting, because you were brought up in Uganda and Ghana. So did that have anything to do with influencing where you are now, your more adventurous kind of like nature?
I really think it did. So when I was 6 weeks old, so my mom had just had me. I was her first baby. She'd never left Scotland, and she and my dad got on a ship, because in those days, in the 60s, airplanes were not quite as common, and they sailed and then took a train all the way inland to Uganda in East Africa. And I was brought up in the foothills of the Mountains of the Moon. So different, but I'm back to living in a rural community in Africa overlooking the mountains. So you can't help but imagine or speculate that as you go through your life journey, I mean, everyone says, oh, life is a circle of life. And actually, I do think that's true. I think you circle back to those things that were so important to you when you were young.
Awesome. So now let's talk a little bit about your corporate career, because also that was a little bit unique as well, because you worked around North Africa and the Middle East, so certainly you haven't led the traditional corporate trajectory.
To some extent, although I'd say my most successful part of my corporate career, I started off in journalism, actually, and I did work for Arabic and English magazines, then TV. Then I was with the BBC. I helped them set up BBC Arabic television the first time round. And then I'd worked for the BBC and became an editor there. So that was quite a senior position, news editor. And then I left all that and I went to start a Quango in England, in the Northwest. And that was about developing the media industries. So really that was quite traditional in that it was, well, it wasn't 9 to 5 because I had so many evening events, but it was about increasing wealth in the northwest of England by attracting investment. And I did that for 9 years. So I think that was quite a traditional thing. I mean, the usual thing you do, office work, meetings. I mean, there were glamorous parts. So, for example, we always had a film in Cannes. So it was the Cannes Film Festival. There were the events like BAFTA, because we had things nominated for that. So I had quite a lot of glamorous red carpet things. And of course, that's a world away from what I do now.
So what led to the transition? I believe it was like 2011, you decided to go off and cycle across Africa. So maybe talk a little bit about this, and then what led you to make that decision?
Well, I mean, actually, it was an interesting way to come to this life. So what happened was I'd been a chief exec for 9 years, and it was a Quango, which is a quasi non-governmental organization. So our funding was partially private, partially public. And what happened was the Conservatives got into government and said they were going to abolish all Quangos. So they abolished the 2 people that funded us mainly. And I took the decision to fold the company into a bigger organization. And so that we could progress that way. So I secured funding for 5 years, folded the company into the bigger organization. And then really that, for me, that was it. So I effectively made myself redundant. And in fact, I was made redundant. And it was a very, very difficult time because I was the chief exec. So I don't know if any of you have been in this position. Making yourself redundant has got its challenges, but making other people redundant is truly awful. And I think it's very bruising. They hate you. Even if there is absolutely nothing you can do about it and you do it in the best way you possibly can, they still hate you. I had to effectively give up a company that I built from scratch, started and built up to a 10 million pound a year company. So I had to kill my own baby effectively, which, you know, was very traumatic in some ways. For me personally, I realized later that it was actually a liberation. So out of that dark time, and, you know, I'm not taking away from the fact that I actually had to impact on other people's lives, my staff or my team, who didn't deserve it and didn't deserve to lose their jobs. But that's the way it is. So I think it was very, very traumatic. But what it led me to do was that all kind of happened towards the end of the year, and it was all happening, and I knew that by January my job was gone. So I thought, right, and so I made the decision for myself to do something completely different. I wanted to go back to Africa. Once you've been in Africa, if you're from Africa, I think the continent will always call you, always. And so I found this race, which was racing on a bicycle from Cairo to Cape Town. I thought, I'll do that. So I signed up and off I went. And that really put my footsteps on this first path to where I am now, 10 years on, with 4 books behind me, a couple of TV series, and an ability to live my life as an adventurer.
Awesome. So now let's talk about that first adventure. So how long does the Tour d'Afrique actually take?
It takes 5. So where are you from, Damien, originally?
I'm from New Zealand originally.
Okay, well, we had a couple of New Zealanders on the tour, actually, and they were very good cyclists. So we cycled from Cairo to Cape Town. It took 5 months, and that was 100 days cycling and 20 days rest. And it was a bike race. So there were stages. They were étapes, just like the Tour de France. In fact, very similar to the Tour de France, but 3 times longer. And that was it. So you cycle every day. We had full support. So we had a giant truck, which carried our gear from camp to camp. So during the day, we just had day bags, and there was always the best highlight of the day was we were given lunch. So there was what we called the lunch truck. And it was good as well, because it was also a way to make sure that we were all secure and through that halfway point. Because as you can imagine, there were lots of challenges racing through Africa. So every day we raced from the beginning to the end, and the middle part, when you got to the lunch truck, which is always a bit over halfway, it's like you breathed a sigh of relief, because A, you could get your sandwich, and B, and fill up on water, and B, you knew you were on the last stretch home.
Awesome. So from Tour d'Afrique, what was next? What kind of like was the next kind of like progression on this adventure journey?
Yeah, so I think it might be interesting to tell people that, you know, I mean, I'm really happy and grateful that I've come quite far and been, I guess, not as successful as I want to, because I'm always ambitious. But, you know, things have gone well for me. But there was never a real decision that I'm going to give up an ordinary life and become an adventurer. It was more of a series of forks in the path that I took. So I went back to the UK and I tried to fit back into normal life. And I put, you know, normal in inverted commas, because no one's life is normal. Everyone's life is extraordinary. But it wasn't for me. I think I'd made that break. I'd retouched myself into my roots with Africa. And I'd spent 4 or 5 months outside doing something I loved. And I just didn't want to go back into an office and to meetings and to being, you know, I hate to say this, because there's a lot of great things about working with a team and doing things together. But, you know, everyone must have had that experience of being in a meeting for 2 hours when nothing actually happens and people just talk and nothing comes out of it. And I just couldn't handle that anymore. I was like, no, you know what? I would rather live more simply, with less stuff, and have a life that I want to lead, that I find energizing, and where I can learn, and where I can progress, and where I can really shape my own destiny, for good or for bad. And sometimes it is bad, but that was my kind of decision. So I'd say that I floundered around for about 18 months. I took another job and it didn't work. And I mean, it gave me, again, everything gives you gifts, you know, everything does benefit you in life, but I just wanted to not do it anymore. So what I did was, on my 50th birthday, I signed up for the Marathon Des Sables, which is the Marathon of the Sands. And it used to be, well, it's called the toughest race on earth, but it's been overtaken, but it's still pretty tough. You run 6 marathons in 6 days across the Sahara Desert, self-supported. So you carry all your own food, you're given water, and you're given a tent at night to sleep in, but you carry your sleeping equipment, everything you wear, everything you eat. And the middle marathon's a double. So on the 4th stage, you do 52 miles, 80, I think it was 82 kilometers, just to give you that little extra challenge. So I signed up for this, and I mean, I'm actually a horrible runner. I'm not, I mean, I do a lot of active stuff because it's where the adventure leads me, but I'm not a great athlete at all. In fact, I'm bad. I'm not a good athlete, really, especially since I don't train very hard. But I did train for the Marathon Des Sables. I was terrified. And one of the things I decided to do was to make it a story. Because I'm a writer, I started in journalism to expand it. And also because I speak Arabic. I studied Arabic and Turkish at uni. And I thought, do something with this. Don't just, you know, spend all this money and train really hard for 6 days in the desert. So I came to Marrakesh in January. The race was in April. And I set up my life here, just what I thought would be for like 4 or 5 months. And then honestly, I fell in love with this country, and I've been here for 8 years.
Awesome. So how was the marathon from a challenge perspective?
It's a really challenging marathon, but it's doable. It's doable. You know, it's not like something like Tour des Géants, which is, I don't know, something like 800 miles in 5 days over all the mountains in Europe. It is doable for a person who trains and works hard at it. It was, the difficulties really were the heat, the sand. Those were the 2 hardest things. And I mean, they were extreme. You know, the heat hit 50 degrees, which is 125, I think, in Fahrenheit. So it was very, very hot. And your feet, most people's feet, and mine definitely did, just, there, a lot of friction in very hot conditions means you get blisters. So that, I think, was the hardest thing, especially on the long stage. I remember I managed the long stage. I was so proud of myself. I didn't stop. I just went straight through. I finished it in, you know, I can't remember now, something like 20 or 22 hours. I mean, it was an extraordinarily long time. You know, ran, walked through the day, watched the sunset. And then I remember at one point running down sand dunes, very high sand dunes, in the dark under the light of a half moon, which was just magical. You know, nobody else around, just in this wilderness. Who gets to do that? It was, I remember that moment still in my heart. And then got through the night, managed to find somebody who had my head torch was just crap. Found someone who had a great head torch, who was also a Scot and was wearing a kilt, and we spent the whole night together. Just by this time we were walking, just marching along these dunes. Got to 2 kilometers before the end, and we looked behind us, and we could tell he was French even from a distance. There was like a French runner who'd obviously slept a bit of the night and was running to try and beat us to the finish line. And John and I were like, no way. So we picked our speed and sprinted for the lines. So did a last couple of kilometers sprint I use the term loosely, to get to the line and beat this French guy who was really trying to get us. And that was great. But what happened was I then got to the tent, and if you finished in time, so I finished just after dawn, and that meant we had a whole day of rest because you were given 2 days to complete this long stage. But I remember taking my socks off, got to my tent. You share a tent with 7 other people. So it's me and 7 blokes all squished into a tent, took my shoes off, and my feet were just, I was like, oh, what are those? And they were, you know, when you've been in the bath too long and your dead skin goes white?
Yep.
My whole soles were like that, punctured by deep red suppurating wounds. And I was like, oh man, this is because we still had one full marathon to go the next day. And I just thought, oh, this is awful. So fortunately they had a medical tent. So I went to the medical tent and got my feet seen to by a lovely, lovely, lovely French nurse, doctor. She basically scalpeled all my pus-filled blisters and then dressed the wounds. And I had, we had a long time to recover because I had that whole day. And then I had the whole night as well until the next marathon. And the next day I woke up, and I don't know if this will resonate with you, Damien, if you do these kind of things, or with anyone out there. I woke up in the morning and I stood on my feet and I couldn't walk. They were so painful. Sorry, my battery says it's dying. I'm going to have to go and get a plug. So my feet were in such agony. I just thought, how am I going to do it? It's the last day. I'm going to finish. If I have to crawl on my belly, I'm going to finish this bloody thing. But how am I going to do it? I'm in such agony because I was on my poles. And when you looked around, we're all meant to be athletes. Everyone's like hobbling around. It's something out of a zombie movie. Anyway, basically, folks, here's my top tip. I saved my painkillers. So I took 6 painkillers. I took 2 codeine, 2 Nurofen, and 2 paracetamol. And then I topped them up every 2 hours. And that's how I got through that race. And I basically started the race that day off my head on painkillers, and I managed to get through it. And actually, I had my best days running of the whole race.
Very good. So now, let's take us to making a decision. Morocco's where I want to base myself. And then you started then making decisions about different adventures you wanted to go on. So what was the first real adventure after the marathon?
Yeah, I did a world first. I walked, in fact, from where I live now. I wasn't living here at the time, but I walked from the highest point of North Africa, which is Mount Toubkal at 4,167 meters, right straight in a straight line across the Atlas Mountains, which means going up, down, to the ocean, to, sea level. And that took 12 days. And I did that with my Amazigh guide, Rashid Majid. So that was the next thing I did. And then, it's all about just finding things you want to do and then raising the funds to do them, and then going off and doing them. So I've kind of been doing it ever since.
So what have been some of the additional kind of adventures you've been on? Because the last one was the walking the length of the Draa River, which is also a world first, but what other adventures were in between?
Yeah, so I ran around Everest. That was a nice one. And then actually the Draa turned into something rather longer. So I did the Draa, got the world first, and then I joined it up, and I ended up walking the whole of Morocco and the Sahara. So that took 7.5 months. And that is the topic of my latest book, Walking with Nomads, which came out 3 weeks ago. So that's been I did it over a period of 2 years because Corona struck as well. And I did it in 3 sections. So I effectively did river, then I went down and did Sahara, and then I went up and did the Atlas Mountains with 6 camels, whom I gave Scottish names to, including Naughty Hamish, who I loved dearly. And my 3 Amazigh guides, Brahim and Addi, were with me for the whole 7.5 months. They only speak Arabic and Tashlahit. So it was an amazing experience. I think 7.5 months on your feet, crossing an entire country. We found a lost city, we found dinosaur footprints, we walked through landmines, we escaped quicksand. We walked through Corona because the last part of our journey was after the first lockdown and before the second. So it's been a very extraordinary journey. And then actually since then as well, in December last year and January this year, I walked the length of Jordan, which also was an incredible experience. So I'm cramming them in, getting them in there.
No, definitely. So how do you make the decision, I want to, number one, be an adventurer, and then make a decision on what kind of adventures you want to go on?
Well, the decision to be an adventurer, I mean, I'm British, so I'm sure New Zealanders are the same. So unlike Americans who have fabulous self-belief and who I admire greatly, we're always a little bit hesitant about saying things about ourselves. Because it's like, in our culture, if you say, I'm an adventurer, people are going to go, yeah, whatever. I don't think so. But I just started signing. That was my ambition. I was like, well, come on, you've cycled across Africa, you've run the Marathon Des Sables. Come on, just say, and that's what you want to do. So say it, own it, be an adventurer. So I started signing my emails adventurer. And then, of course, I had to do adventures to live up to it. So it's a little bit about visualizing what you want to be and then saying you're it, but then backing it up with real stuff. Because I feel very uncomfortable if I'm not being authentic, I don't mind exaggerate. Of course, we all exaggerate our stories, but I do feel deeply uncomfortable if I feel I'm not being true or authentic about what I'm doing and how I'm presenting it to people. I think it's good enough, and I want it to be out there in a really true format, because people deserve the truth. They don't deserve to be fibbed to or lied to. So if I say I'm an adventurer, I have to do plenty of adventurers. So that's how that came about.
Awesome. And then making the decision on the adventures you're going to undertake, how do you go about doing that?
That's quite a kind of that's often where my feet have come to certain paths and I've taken them. So it really depends on what time I've got, so the length of the adventure, what kind of challenge I want to undertake, and whether I can get funding or support for it so that I can afford to do it, and the interest in it. So, running around Everest, for example, again, was an ultra marathon, and I was supported by a big website called Run Ultra, and by the Everest Trail Race Marathon, if anyone wants to do it, absolutely incredible adventure. And I signed up for that because I was feeling really unfit and unmotivated, and I'd let myself go and I wasn't exercising. And I thought, sign up for something really hard that will force you out of your laziness. And I mean, running around Everest, that's pretty hard. And that actually led me to live here, because I was living on the coast in Morocco. I was living in Essaouira, beautiful, really lovely by the sea, and coastal living, it's a lovely lifestyle, but it leads me to laziness. Whereas I had to train in the mountains because I was going to be running at altitude. So I moved here where the conditions are very similar, and I just started working at it. So that was one decision. It was like a propelling myself forward. And then the Draa River, I wanted to do something in Morocco. I'm doing all these adventures outside of Morocco, but I live here. So that seemed like a sensible geographical section, a river, source, sea. Oh, that's the call to prayer. So off I went and did it. And then I joined it up. So it's always been a little bit about having an idea and then seeing how it goes and being flexible about it and moving forward with it.
Awesome. So what have been some of the more memorable moments in all these adventures, the standouts for you?
The memorable moments or the miserable moments?
Well, you can give both, because I think it's good to give a perspective.
Yeah. So the memorable moments are, let's talk about, let's talk about Walking with Nomads, the book, and that whole adventure across Morocco. So for me, the memorable moments were like the big moments, stumbling across a lost city. It's like, this is so cool. Exploring, finding these incredible spaceship, Stone Age spaceship shapes on top of ridges in the desert. I mean, it's extraordinary. And what's extraordinary when you're exploring in that way is you're there. There's nobody else for miles and miles and miles. You actually get to explore for yourself. So you get to try and work out what's happening for yourself, and to be there and to look around and to really feel that connection with history. These incredible spaceship shapes, they're actually funerary monuments, but very little is known about them. They probably date from around 4,000 years ago. But because I was there with Jean-Pierre, but just exploring, I was like, you notice everything. You measure and find the wings are entirely symmetrical. This is, this is before compasses.
Yeah.
You find that exactly the central head, if you like, the bridge is pointing exactly westward, exactly. So it's about appreciating all those things for the first time. Nobody's told you, or you haven't watched a YouTube video about it. You're like in there doing it. And I love that. And then of course you find out as much as you can afterwards. So I think those high moments are very strong. But for me, the real joy about that expedition was my relationship with the men. Because before I left, I thought, right, I'm going to be spending all this time with 3 very religious Muslim men who will not approve of me because I'm doing something that no single woman would ever in Moroccan culture and in Muslim culture go away with 3 men that she's not married to or related to for 3 months. It's, you know, spend the nights camping in obviously in different tents, but you know, it just wouldn't happen. And I'm not married, I don't have children, and that's how a woman's worth is judged here. So I knew that they would kind of disapprove of me, and I thought, I'm going to be really lonely. They only speak in Arabic and Tashlahit. My Tashlahit, I'm learning actually. I had my lesson just before you, but my Arabic is good. But I thought, you know, I'm an English speaker, I'm a Christian, I'm a middle-aged woman. They're men. There's one of them's very young, the other 2 are around about my age, but we're so different. I won't be part of the team. And actually on, I think the second day of that expedition, Brahim, who was the leader, the team leader, he said, I was walking at the back and I was feeling a little bit like, well, you know, walking behind the camels, just thinking about the enormity of what I took on. And he yelled behind me. So they call me Zahra, which means flower. And he yelled, Zahra, get up here beside me. And so I trotted up, and camels walk quite fast, so if you fall behind, you have to run. So I ran up to the front to walk beside Brahim, who, by the way, is completely veiled. And he said, Zahra, you have to walk with me. One hand can't clap. And from that moment on, I was an integral part of the team, and I've never felt so secure and loved and supported in my whole life.
It's amazing. So beyond obviously that amazing experience, you know, how is walking, doing these kind of like long treks, how does that give you a different perspective of a place?
It gives you an entirely different perspective, and I would encourage really everyone, wherever you are, to go out and walk. Cycling as well, fantastic, but anything that you can just stop, sit under a tree, look at what's around you, experience what the air feels like, feel what the ground feels like under your feet, look at the minutiae, you know, lift up the rock with your foot and find the scorpion underneath it. Look at the plants, see if you can eat any of them. Don't try them, but you know, can you eat any of them? What is actually there? What are the people? How are they living? You have time. When you walk, you have time, and I think that is the greatest. It's the only treasure we really have in life, actually, in the end. So exploit it, enjoy it, and take that time. Just look and listen and feel, and you have that experience, you know. And also walking, that's what we've done since we became Homo erectus. That's what we've done. We've walked. So you are back, you are connecting to the planet in the most fundamentally human way, I think. I mean, that's when we became humans, was when we stood up and started walking. So for me, it's got a very strong kind of visceral connection to this world.
Awesome. So we highlighted one of the most memorable moments. What have been some of the scarier moments? Like, because I'm sure over the time you've kind of like mounted a few close encounters that kind of like brought some memories.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is with what I do, you are going to have some intense moments. And I think, I mean, there's lots I could talk about, but I think perhaps one of the most intense moments, and actually it gave me the title of my first book, which is called Dodging Elephants, which is about cycling from Cairo to Cape Town. I was cycling along and we were on the border with Botswana, and we were in Africa. You have a lot of scrub at the side, which is like very thick thorn trees, and it's not jungle, it's not, but it's kind of very scrubby, thorny trees up to about 7 foot tall, very, very dense undergrowth. and then you have the road through it. And we were going through and somebody yelled, because we're in like a long string of cyclists, imagine 63 people racing, and kind of the word kind of got yelled down, there's elephant ahead. Now, I was brought up in Africa and I know how dangerous elephants are. Every year where we lived in Uganda, people got killed, trampled. So I know that they're really dangerous. I know that they're really territorial. And so I thought, right, I'll stop here. Let whatever's, let the elephant pass, whatever's going to happen, just relax. So stopped my bike, got my suntan lotion out because, I'm fair skinned, have to try and be careful. Was putting on my suntan lotion, and suddenly, literally across the road, which was about, I don't know, even like 15 meters away, erupted a young bull elephant at full charge. With elephants, when they're angry, his ears were erect and flapping. They flap their ears and they trumpet, and their trunks are up. And he erupted, charging directly at me. So if you imagine, he was diagonally that way and I was here. So I had to, I obviously just dropped everything, had to turn my bike around and started cycling. Now, an elephant can move at 50 kilometers an hour, and he was in full charge mode. And I was absolutely sure I was going to die, to be honest. I was absolutely sure. He was so close that I could feel the reverberations of his feet underneath my bicycle. And it was just the most, well, it was awful. I mean, it was absolutely and utterly terrifying, because it wasn't a matter of like thinking I was going to die. I knew I was going to die. And my thoughts were things like, is it going to hurt? Is he going to spear me with a tusk, or trample me with his feet, or just kind of crush me off the bike and then stamp on me, because elephants tend to trample their victims. Anyway, to find out how I got out of it, you'll have to read the book, Dodging Elephants. That's all I'm saying. But clearly I didn't die. But I've had a few close calls, and that was definitely the one where I had time to actually think about my time, but where I pretty well faced up to the fact I was going to die. Awesome. And I didn't. So I'm very grateful.
And the good thing is it didn't turn you off adventures.
Oh, I know. Sometimes I just think these are all extra days.
Yeah. So now let's walk through, once you've decided on an adventure, what's the kind of preparation you go through? So do you go through any kind of physical training, mental training, or what do you do to get ready?
Yeah, well, so there's a whole lot of things. So for me, when I've decided on the adventure, the first thing is to try and find sponsors to support me on that adventure, because the things I do, especially the walk across Morocco, for example, they're very, I'm hiring a whole team, I'm organizing, you've got to get permission from the government for every step of the way. It's actually a big logistical undertaking. So the first thing is to find sponsors. I've been very lucky. So I've been sponsored often by crag hoppers who sell outdoor kit, hiking kit, and they also give me my equipment. So I've got really good equipment for the journey, which makes a massive difference. I've also been sponsored by people like Battleface Travel Insurance. So that's number one thing you do. Number two is I then have to try and get interest in the press, because it's part of it. If you do these expeditions, if you want to get a book out of it, if you want to get any coverage at all, you have to get that coverage. So that takes a huge amount of time, making sure your press releases are right, making sure you've sent them out to hundreds of people, of maybe 2 will pick them up, and just following that through, making sure everything's ready, your website's sorted, all your social media is on point, so that everybody knows what you're doing. And that is, if you're someone like me, I'm not independently wealthy. I can't afford to just pluck money out of the sky. So I need sponsorship, and then I need to give value to the sponsors. And I think that's something people don't really think about so much, maybe, when they're setting out on this path. Then you have to find someone to do the adventure with. Some things you can do alone, but the parts of the world I'm kind of working in, is it safe for a woman to set off entirely on her own? Possibly. Why would I want to do that? I would not learn anything about the local, I am desperate to learn about the local culture, about the places I'm passing through, and I also want to enjoy it. And there is, if you're completely on your own, I mean, you couldn't cross the Sahara on your own anyway, because you need water. It would be insanely dangerous unless you're incredibly, unless you're an ex-SAS soldier, which I'm not. So you have to get the organization sorted. So for example, in Morocco, I worked with a guy called Jean-Pierre Datchari from Dardaïf, or Désiré Montagne. Amazing guy, fascinating guy who knows so much. And you profit so much from people who know more than you. So I was like plugging myself into his brain. He got me the team. It was his team. It was his camels who were then with me for 7.5 months. And, that was amazing. So I think once you've sorted out your media and your sponsors, and you've got someone to you're working with whoever you're going to be working with on the trip, your support crew, whether they're with you all the time or they're supporting you behind the scenes, get that all in place. Then the last, perhaps what should be the biggest part of this puzzle, is the training. And I am notoriously bad at training, and my friends will all tell you this who know me, is I'm a real pendulum person. I'm not I don't know. I think basically my default personality is quite lazy. So I love, you see me at the moment on my terrace, my cat is sleeping behind the phone. I love sitting on my terrace eating cake. I'm good at cooking, good at baking. I love food. So I tend to pile on the pounds. I'm like, oh, maybe I won't walk up that very steep, hot mountain today. Maybe I will sit and read a book instead. So for me, training is something I really have to force myself to. And I think it's one of those things, when I'm terrified enough, I train. But if I think I can get away with it, I don't. And then I always suffer. And really, it's so important. And it's my resolution before my next adventure is to be in really excellent shape when I start off, because you're always in excellent shape by the time you finish, of course. But it's maintaining a good level of fitness and also not letting the pounds pile on. You need maybe a little bit of extra weight because you're going to lose, but you certainly don't need as much as I tend to put on. So I think that's my weakest point. I think training is definitely my weakest point. And it's because I'm lazy, it's like, who wants to get up at 5 a.m. and go up a mountain? Not really. It's always good when you do it, but the getting motivated is certainly a challenge. I don't know if you feel that.
Well, I think everyone does. I mean, if you get into a routine, then it's kind of a little bit easier, but I wouldn't classify you as completely lazy. All the adventures you've kind of like piled together, I don't think anyone who's lazy would have kind of like accumulated all of them. So let's talk quickly about stress and uncertainty, because obviously there's certain things you encounter which you can't prepare for. So you obviously have to be able to deal with it. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there are certain personality traits that help me, and my personality trait that helps me is I am really optimistic and positive, and I do believe another day, a better day will come, and I do believe that everything will turn out well. So that really helps me. And the other thing is I've got quite a short memory. So I don't remember how horrible things will be before I set off. I've forgotten that camels walk really fast, and that, walking 5 kilometers an hour for 5 hours straight in the desert every day is actually very stressful on your body sometimes. So I just tend to forget those things and remember, unzipping my tent to an African sunrise every morning. That's what I tend to focus on, and the amazing feeling of being out in nature all the time. So that helps. Also, I think it's important to keep yourself safe, which wherever you are on the gender spectrum, but I do possibly feel for women there are particular issues that we face, and that perhaps the main one that we face that most men don't is the possibility of sexual assault. So I think keep yourself safe, make sure you're with people you trust or in places you trust. Be alert to be alert. You can't control everything, but don't take unnecessary risks, and just make sure you're prepared before you go. For one of the reasons I like to walk with a guide is to make sure that I'm safe and protected, that I've got someone else with me, that if I fall and break something, someone's there. We're less likely to get lost, etc., etc. So I think take good precautions so that you are satisfied with your level of safety, And then you're able to deal with whatever comes up. And really, you know, every day, this too shall pass. And sadly, for the great days as well as the awful days, but this too shall pass. So just keep trucking.
Very good. And then we kind of like need to kind of like discuss, how do you keep yourself motivated? Because, you know, you're talking about 7 months, it's quite a journey. And then you're talking about very challenging environments. You've got these camels walking pretty fast. So, you know, there are days when obviously you feel quite challenged. So how do you kind of like push yourself through?
Well, I'd say, I mean, first of all, overall, I never feel as alive as I do when I'm doing an adventure, ever. I am living my best life when I'm doing that. I feel totally engaged in it, on it, at it. I feel good. I feel like Alice Morrison is out there. She's doing it. She's on her thing. She's being what she's meant to be. So there is a deep love in me for doing these things. And I am a real appreciator. I'm like, oh, look at that butterfly. Oh, it's yellow. It's beautiful. So I'm definitely a person who enjoys, you know, sucks the marrow out of the moments. And keeping motivated is definitely about not looking too far ahead. Don't look too far ahead, because if you look at the whole task, you just think, oh my goodness, I'm not going to do this. But just take the next step. So I'm very strongly of just take the next step. Look forward to, you know, when we're going to bivouac at 2 o'clock and I'm going to get a cup of hot, sweet Moroccan tea. That is going to do it for me. The companionship, when you're with a team, when you're with a person, if you feel down, I think just talking to that person can really help. And then personally, if I'm in the dark place, which for me, it manifests itself often as anger. I'll be really angry. I'll be like, oh, you know, why is the sun so hot? Ah, and unfortunately, and usually I want to be angry at somebody, but inevitably the people I'm walking with, it isn't their fault, and they're being absolutely lovely to me. So I think I need a bit of time alone to just feel the feeling, accept it. It'll change, get over it, and then, you know, wake up the next day to do it all again. Yeah, that's my motivation. And I think don't ever let stopping come into your head again. That's why I keep saying this, because it's true. Just use all your energy on keeping going.
Awesome. So what have these adventures taught you about yourself?
For that that I need to make sure I keep my temper in check, because it's unreasonable. That I am a bit lazy and I shouldn't be. But that, you know, that I'm just part of, I think the most, perhaps, I don't know, for me, the most profound thing is that I connect very hard with the world when I walk across it. I'm walking across the world. So, you know, my feet are planted on Mother Nature's earth, and, you know, my head's reaching up into God's sky. And I think I feel a very profound sense of oneness with the planet that we live in, and appreciation for the time I have on it. Time is short for all of us. It doesn't seem it. And I think that's probably my age as well. You know, when you're in your 20s, you never think about this stuff. When you're in your 50s, you realize that, oh, things are going quickly. So what have I learned about myself? I like myself, you know. I like myself best when I'm being my truest self and when I'm trying hard. So I think doing these adventures allows me to be that and to do that. So I think that's what I've learned. Oh, and the other thing I've learned, and that I was taught actually by Brahim, who is our expedition leader, the one who said one hand can't clap. He's a very, very religious person. So he taught me a lot of the Quran, which I can now recite off by heart, which is a real joy. But what he taught me was patience, sabr. So in Morocco, patience is very important, because I think in the West, we're used to being able to influence our own destinies. We're used to having choice. And here, a lot of people can't influence their own destinies and don't have any choice. So they have to learn patience, and they have to learn to exist within the situation they're in. That's their situation. They have to live within it. And you can either accept it and embrace it and be as happy as you can, or deal with it as you can, or you rail against it. So I think I've learned patience and to fit in rather than to swim against the tide. So to, if you like, suppress my individuality and my individual needs and desires, and to go with the flow of society and the current. So I think those are really big things that I've learned. I don't always practice them. And when I breach them, if I become impatient, or if I try to assert my individuality against the group or the society I'm in, it ends badly, usually.
Very good. So what's planned next? What's the next adventure?
Well, at the moment, I'm looking to walk across Palestine, across the West Bank. So I'm looking at how I can do that. It's quite complicated, and it might be that I do this one in a more formal way. So that's what's coming up next. But that I mean, where I live, you know, so the areas I really am passionately interested in. I'm interested in the whole world, but I guess my speciality, because I do speak good Arabic, is the Middle East and Africa. And that's where my heart lies. So which is wonderful. And it's brought me huge richness and pleasure and happiness. But the one difficulty, of course, is we have a weather issue. So I can only do things in certain seasons of the year. So realistically, you're looking at October till March. And after that, it's too hot. So it's trying to fit things into that period. But I guess it's exactly the same if you're a mountaineer and you love the Himalaya, then you've also got a climbing season. These things are just part of when you like doing things in places that have extreme climates.
Yep. No, very good. So quick question, do you have a bucket list, or is just adventures and you discover what comes along, or do you have a list of things you would like to do?
I'm actually really open to suggestions. So I mean, if somebody messages me and says, hey, Alice, will you do this with us, for us, or whatever, and it's something I think, oh, okay, yeah, why not? I'll do it. So I keep myself really open. But yeah, I think I've been refining that. And again, it's partly, you know, as I move through this adventure journey. So what I've come to realize is I do have this quite extraordinary thing, which is having lived so much of my life now in Africa and the Middle East, and learned Arabic and practicing Arabic and using Arabic and really putting myself out of my comfort zone all the time to use my languages. I want to continue to do that. So I would say my bucket list is going around a lot of the Middle Eastern and North African countries and crossing those. I'm also drawn very strongly to Africa. So even though I've crossed top to tail, there are certain countries I haven't done. So yeah, I do have my little desire list, and part of it is going to be unattainable. I rather like crossing countries. You know, I find that that's the thing that I enjoy. I understand it mentally about doing that. And then I would like to do, and I also like, it's very important to me to be able to show my culture, the Western culture, all the joy and happiness and comradeship and love and friendship I get from people in these cultures, which are by virtue of the things that are happening in the media often portrayed. It's not that they're portrayed badly, it's that there's been so many wars in the Middle East, in Africa, so much violence. And so I think showing the other side of that is also very important to me. So, you know, if I were able, I lived in Syria for a time, way back when I was studying, and Syria's been entirely destroyed and gutted by civil war. But I would love to be able to go back and walk across it and show the other side, not the political side, not the oppressive side, not the violent side, but the other side that, you know, that is there. So I think showing that other side to people is definitely one of the things that drives me. I would love to go to Iraq. I'd love to do Iran, but I don't speak Persian. And at the moment, British people, I think, are unable to get visas. So there's all of these countries that I have a desire to explore. And also they're so full of history, and I'm a history nerd, love it. I love history. And these places are just crammed with history. Walking across Jordan, it's like almost every footstep was on a holy site or a Byzantine site or a Roman site or an Ottoman site. So, you know, that's a thing that really gives me pleasure and joy, and I like to share that with other people. It gets you into trouble as well. The regions I walk in are often disputed. But I think if your aim is true and you try, then it's worth going forward.
So why do you think people should include more adventure in their lives?
Well, I mean, look, you know, I've just been very open with you about how lazy I am and that I like to eat. And, you know, I do all these really very physical things because I love the adventure. But I've also told you that I do not feel more alive than when I'm adventuring. I genuinely don't. And I mean, I am a person who loves her life, you know, believe you me, I get a huge pleasure from my life. But adventuring, I think I do feel there's an innate feeling in humans that we want to push ourselves, that we want to move forward, that we want to enjoy what's around us. And adventuring gives me all of that. And adventuring should be what it is to you personally. You know, every person has a different definition of it. Every person has a different way they engage with the world. But the part that I enjoy is definitely also linked to being outside and to using your body as an animal, as a human animal, and crossing the outdoors and keeping your eyes open and seeing what you can see. So I would really encourage anyone to push themselves a bit out of their comfort zone and try something. And, you know, honestly, I can't tell you how often I've had people look at me and say, "You?" and really disbelieve what I've achieved. So if you're one of the ordinary people like me, who's just ordinary and isn't, you know, hasn't got a six-pack or thighs of steel, well, actually I have got thighs of steel, funnily enough, but hasn't got a six-pack, or doesn't look, or isn't 22, just ignore people, just do it. It's none of their business anyway. And the fact is, if you go out and adventure away and succeed, then you've done it. Don't worry. I think adventure, just go and do what you fancy doing. Push yourself a little bit, because every time you push yourself, you'll increase, you'll gain, and ignore what other people say about you.
Awesome.
Unless they say you're marvelous. And if they say you're marvelous, go, "Thank you very much."
Very good. So getting close to finish up, there's a number of questions I ask each of our guests. So question number...
Are you getting a lot of noise? So I'm just going to interrupt a second. Are you getting a lot of noise? Because we've got something going on behind me. Do you want me to move inside?
No, it's okay. We can kind of light it up a bit.
Okay.
So what would you say to someone approaching, or who's over 40, is kind of like viewing it with a little bit of trepidation? Someone who's like going, "Oh my God, I'm turning 40. What would you say to them?
Okay, so if you're a woman, the good news is women actually get better at endurance sports after about the age of 38, 35. So you're in your peak, go for it. For men and women, I would say everything you have learned in life, all of the things you've learned are going to make you better at doing adventures, whether they be physical or mental or emotional. You know, that experience is invaluable. On Tour de France, one of my closest friends was a guy called Nick, who was a high-level corporate lawyer. And he said to me, he said, like, cycling across the Sudan in 50 degrees heat is nothing compared to sitting in a corporate meeting where they all want to, you know, to squeeze you for every penny they can get. So I think midlife is fantastic. I'm having a whale of a time, and just keep doing it. Marco Olmo won the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, which is like the Olympics of ultra running, for the first time when he was 58, beating men in their 20s. Awesome. Go for it.
Definitely. So what's your definition of ageless living?
Ageless living is doing as much as you can do and enjoying as much as you can at any time.
Very good. And what is your definition of, or what for you is living a legend life or your best life?
I think I am living a legend life and my best life, because I've come out of, you know, working for other people and corporate working and earning lots of money. And now I have lots and lots of time. And I spend it doing what I like, but also continuing to push myself and to move towards what I consider to be achievement, so that I can feel proud of myself. Really, what other people think about you doesn't matter, but what you think of yourself does matter. So for me, living a legend life is is doing the best you can and also being nice to yourself. I mean, after this, literally, I'm going to go and cook lunch, sit on the terrace with the cats, and I've done stuff today and I'm proud of it, and that's enough. So I think sort out what's good for you, what gives you joy, what gives you pleasure, and seek it.
Awesome. So do you have a life mantra or a life philosophy you live by?
No, I just try and enjoy my days, enjoy my time, be nice to other people, and live a good life. And not as much, I'm no Nelson Mandela. I mean, those are the people I really admire who sacrifice themselves for others. That's not me. But I think even when you're living a normal, like a normal selfish life, I guess, just kind of try and be as decent as you can. And if you do something wrong, which I do all the time, don't punish yourself for it too much. Just try the next time to do better, and you probably will. And if you do it wrong again in the future, again, just keep moving forward with purpose.
Awesome. Last question. What are three life lessons you've learned in life that you think would be of value to others?
Be patient. Think about other people before yourself, and push yourself out of your comfort zone.
Awesome. Alice, thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you. Certainly been very inspirational and motivational. So for anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about yourself, and then obviously your new book, Walking with Nomads, how can they find you online?
Very easy. If you just put Alice Morrison into Google, you'll find me. My website's called alicemorrison.co.uk. All my links to social media and everything are off that. And I've got blogs, a podcast, everything, Instagram, TikTok, etc., etc., and all the books you can get through there. So, and if you can't remember Alice Morrison, just put in Alice Morocco, and you'll also find me very easily.
Very good. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun talking to Chief Legend.